to just defend the physicians, they have a couple minutes. And so I can make it, I own the place, so I can make it as long as I want. But, I see a patient 2 to 3 times a week for 4 to 6 weeks. You can figure it all out. And if a doctor had that amount of time with them too, they'd figure out more than I could figure out. So it has nothing to do with that kind of thing. It's more their time is pressured. And they're really big part of what they're doing is to figure out the oh shit stuff. So they're listening to see, is this cancer? Is this a heart disease? Is this some kind of obscure disease? I can't even tell you what it is. I don't know that stuff.
Right.
And so my niche is I know I'm good at what I do somewhat because I've been doing it for 23 years, a lot because of that teacher I told you about, because it really changed how I do things. But again, back to that science part, it's not, I'm like really primitive in what I talk about.
Yeah.
And so I even know when I'm writing articles or on the air that if there's a physical therapist listening, they're probably thinking, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. And there's some truth in what they're saying. And yet I know it's what the patient needs to hear, or I can sense that that's going to help them more than me saying to them that, you have a herniated L4, L5 disc. Like, who the hell cares?
Yeah, that just sounds scary.
Yeah. And so you had said something about that. Like, we get in the way. Patients, people get in the way of the body. We're not doing anything to on the real primitive level, breathe, make yourself breathe. And so, yes, you can slow your heart rate down, you can slow your breath work down, but you can't make your lungs stop and you can't make your lungs go. They're going to do it completely. In fact, as soon as you get out of the way, they just go on their own merry way. And it's like that with everything. And so I really, and the place I had before the current place, we called it a wellness center. And so we did a lot of this kind of talk with patients. I don't do it as much anymore. And there's a lot of reasons why. There's things that happen to me personally that make me resistant or hesitant is a better word to dive into some of the things we're talking about, because people, it's work to go into the non, what was the word you said before? You're analytical, very scientific, very rational. Yeah. Because there's also people have stories and dramas that go around things, and they have religious beliefs and they have cultural beliefs. And so you start to get that into the big muck, and it makes for a mess. And so in that regard, that's what I mean by listening to someone, because I have worked with all nationalities, ages, every kind of belief system that you can imagine. And so it's fine with me. I can dance in all of them, because within that is my way of guiding you to the basic principle of you need to move, or you need to stop doing this, but do this instead. And that's not, I don't know. Like, so when I see physical therapists, I see how they process things, and I really feel like I'm not a very good physical therapist. But I really can tell you, like, right. But I can tell you how to get better more because I know that rest of it. That's the point. So
okay.
I can walk where you walk. Like the chameleon kind of thing. I can talk to the most spiritual religious person, and I can talk to the most country bumpkin redneck person. My whole family live in the country. So I have a whole bunch of cousins that I'm real familiar with that turf. And I actually like when the real smart, intelligent person that comes in and starts speaking a lot of big words, because I just start throwing Latin and anatomy and physiology terms at them. And I also know there's alpha males that come in, and I can present myself as a stronger alpha male and take over the room. But I can also be really bending and very zen and letting go and let somebody else have the way, the bamboo thing. I very much can do that.
That's great. It's kind of like dreams in a way, because we all have them, and they must mean something. I mean, it must be like, but it kind of is your own language.
Yeah.
It's, you dream in your own language.
Right.
Your dream is not going to mean much to me.
Right.
And if it does, it's definitely not what it meant to you.
And I don't need to have my dream influence you.
Right. Yeah. You're listening to my dream and trying to understand how it impacts me.
Yes.
And then
that's the
using my own language to help me figure out what it is.
I had a early mentor. He was a classmate of mine, and he had such a good way of explaining things to people. So I asked him, how he got so good at it. And he said to me, I imagine that I'm talking to my dad, and my dad's a blue collar guy. So if I can explain it to him, I can explain it to anyone. And so I took the same type of idea, and I would figure I could explain it to my mom. And my mom is she's a wonderful person, but she would challenge me. She would question it. So I had to figure out a way not to take that personally. That's her story, not mine. So if she doesn't like how I'm saying it, it's my agenda. I have to change how I'm saying it to help her. So I let go of my way and find your way, and whatever it is. I mean, of all the skills that I feel the strongest in, that's where I feel the strongest, with patience.
I mean, I find that difficult to do. I mean, I know exactly what you're describing.
Yeah.
Because I know for a fact, just even outside the physical therapy,
Yeah.
but in the helping a person,
Yeah.
you can't help a person who you can't do it for them.
No.
And you don't get to decide the way they do it. You don't get to decide how they figure it out.
Right.
I can know exactly what someone's problem is.
Yep.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If they don't know what it is,
right.
I can't
there's a famous quote my teacher David talked about, and it's something to do with you're getting someone to have your way, but they think they're doing it. It's their way. And it's some like Winston Churchill quote or something like that. That's diplomacy. And that's like these little things, all these mentors that come along in my life, and those mentors, the ones that I admired the most, were the ones that could communicate the best to the patient and or were incredibly calm. And so I don't get rattled. I mean, I shouldn't say that because something will come in tomorrow and it'll rattle the hell out of me, but it's rare for me to get rattled. And so I had a gentleman that fell. It wasn't my patient. It was one of my other therapist patient. But I just go over and I'm just talking to him. And part of that is because if I go over panicked and nervous, he's already scared and worried. So all it's going to do is magnify the problem. And so then I listen to him and how he's talking. And if he's already making jokes about it, then I start, saying things like, I hope you didn't put a dent in my floor. So it just breaks the ice, and he's not worried about it, and say, just take a minute and we'll get you up. I don't think you can get me up. I can get you up. If I have to get 3 people or I get a truck in here, I'll get you up. Don't worry about that. So, but it's, and then at the other end, there could be someone who's really scared. So I'll just sit down right next to him and just breathe with him. And I don't know where, I'm trying to think where that comes from, but there's something about when you're around somebody else that's really common breathing, you'll start to breathe in sync with them. And there's like a triggering reaction. So I practiced breath work for years. So you had mentioned meditation and things. And I would go into a private room at my last office and just literally breathe and meditate for 5 minutes in between patients to make sure I was calm inside. And then what started to happen to me kind of spontaneously is when the stress would come up, I would just start to be breathing. And it wasn't because I was trying to, it's because I'd practiced so much. So in those moments, if I'm calm, the person next to me is going to calm down. And I had a therapist that worked for me for a while, and we would practice that. We would get the people that were really excitable, intense, and worried and fearful. And he and I would just really practice our deep breathing, grounding, and just to see, like as a game, can we calm this person down without talking to them, without touching them, just by us being calm. And it was really remarkable to see the impact of it. And it definitely, most people who have kids will know this. If a child goes down and you freak out, it just makes it worse. But if you're calm and you talk in that calm way, the child will kind of follow along. Well, that works for adults too.
Yeah.
So
it's the same with dogs.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And like if you have a significant other and they wake up in the middle of the night in bed with you and they had a nightmare.
Yeah.
And they just grab you.
Yep.
They can't just talk to
you. And
you
you're not going to make them better by saying it's fine, you're safe.
But if you just lay there and you stay relaxed,
and relaxed and calm.
Amen. Yeah, it works. That's really interesting.
Yep.
It does resonate because actually last night I've started to realize recently that when I get a headache, I think I'm giving them to myself because something happens and I get nervous about a headache coming on.
You're thinking too much.
Yes.
That's what headaches can be.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there is something like my posture isn't great.
Yeah.
And
There's
I'm
a
working
physical
on it.
component. Yep.
But so whatever my body's doing to help me with that, it doesn't feel great.
Yeah.
And it happened last night. I was laying down and I thought, oh God, it's starting to happen again. I'm getting all nervous. And then I just took a breath.
Yep.
I just felt like I'm out of my way.
Yeah.
I'm actually here now. I'm not thinking about what if,
Right.
what happens now, what happens next.
Right.
It's going to be like it was before.
Right.
and my body just, it did what it did. I went right back to sleep,
Right.
and it was no big deal.
So that's the difference between pain and suffering. Pain is a physiological reaction. Suffering is a mental. And there's another thing, like some of the reasons why my staff will do the manual work. There's a few things. When we know that when people are touched, it calms them down. So it depends on how you're touched. But the other thing is that I've taught them specific points. And some of the points that are up around the head, for example, the base of the skull to the trap is a gallbladder meridian point, and the gallbladder represents frustration. And so it's a very common thing for people to come in who are frustrated, who also have headaches. And is it the frustration or is it the headache? Is it both? It doesn't matter to me. I just know that if I push on those points, it makes the person relax and feel better. It hurts pragmatic. Like holy hell at sometimes, but, and then the other part is that there is a physical component. So back to my teacher, it is or it isn't. So if we have a headache that is cervicogenic in nature, then it's going to respond to cervicogenic treatment, meaning we can do a mobilization to you, can do some exercises for it, and it will respond accordingly. And if it's not that, okay, fair enough, but now you know it's not that. And then you can go to number 2. And in this particular region, that is thinking too much. So that would be the first step, is what you just said, start to take some breaths, come back to this moment, not worried about the future, but right here. And then there's also the potential of the eastern side, so the acupuncture point. So again, the gallbladder. And there can be times where you have an organ that's not working properly. So I have a patient who has had a kidney disorder, and her kidney meridian is like, and you push on any spot and it's like a rock in each spot, and there's a tension that's held there. And that's weird because that doesn't match anything physiologically. And yet if I walked into there and just pushed on, didn't know she had any problem with her kidney, I could say, oh, something's up with your kidney, because it's so clear. And so when I have patients, I'll mention things like that to them just to see if there's a reaction from them for that. Because if there's a reaction of, oh, I've been really frustrated lately, or, oh, God, I'm so frustrated, then it becomes something you can do. You can do something about your frustration. You can look into it. Frustration is a buried anger. So you're angry about something. And so you start to look into the anger of what are you angry about? And it's not a looking at it to try to make it go away. It's more to look at it to see what it's showing you. And a lot of times people are trying to make these things go away instead of listening to the lesson that they're trying to teach you. And if you start to listen to, and it's not easy. So by the way, that's not an easy thing to do, but that's ultimately I believe why things cycle back around.
This is resonating with me. Like, especially I'm just trying to fix it.
Yeah.
I'm not listening at all, because
and that's something that could be all it took, is just that little piece. And then the rest of it becomes easy. The shouldering is shouldering burden. It's carrying the weight of the world on your back. So those kind of things are all upper back and neck. The lower back and hip is support. And so if you're not being supported, you're not supporting something you want to do, people will have manifestation of symptoms in the hip area. The knee is moving forward. It's the thing that leads our movement. The foot is also similar. The calf is lifting yourself up. I mean, they have all these different, hands are holding on. So I had this time where I was having like ridiculous hand pain, and I couldn't match it to anything necessarily physically, but I'd been holding on to the story of my facility. My facility in Gloversville didn't end well. It didn't end terribly, but it didn't end well. And so I held on to story for a long time, and I would find that I'd get more and more frustrated, that, and my hands would hurt more and more. And that my friend who I told you, the physical therapist, massage therapist, asked me, what am I holding on to? I'm like, but then it's revealed, and it's like, it's something minor, but hurt feelings and an old story that I was still stuck in. And that's what I'm holding on to. And then you can't make it go away. So it's not like, okay, I'm not going to do that anymore. It's more that every time it comes up, then you can start to evaluate, is this something that's still happening? Is this something I want to deal with? And then it starts to soften. And so through that process, it's exactly the same for the upper back and neck. It's listen to what it's trying to tell you. And if you can do that, I really believe, I know, I've seen it again and again, the solutions come way faster. And it's when we try to fix it or make it better. Again, trying to make the body better. Get out of the body's way, let it do what it's supposed to do. And people think of pain as a negative thing, and I do understand that myself, but it is a guide. It's neutral. Pain is not, it's nothing. It's a physiological response, nothing more. The suffering is the mental part.
That what you said about the distinction between pain and suffering, that's something hard to accept.
Yeah.
That because there's an implication there that suffering you're doing to yourself.
You are.